Yeah, I kept going back and forth. As the wind blows, I've got down here, anywhere the wind blows. I was thinking of a song by Southern Pacific, which you may have heard of or maybe not, the Southern rock song, Anywhere the Wind Blows. Thing about that song, it's got this breezy, freedom-y feel to it, the possibilities of life, and it seems like it's commensurate a lot with what we're talking about today. And of course, on a more directed level, we got The Answers Blowing in the Wind by Dylan. Again, coming from somewhere else than the world. With that said, I remember hiking up my first mountain. It was Mount Marcy in the Adirondacks overlooking Lake Placid. And hiking up the mountain and scrambling to the top, we ended on the summit in the middle of a cloud. The winds were maybe 30 miles an hour, and you could feel, speaking of water, you could feel that little bit of water that is in the midst of a cloud, eh? And when that happened, I went right into the present moment. I was so awestruck. I had hoped to see something more, but we were in the middle of a cloud, and so I didn't, but it struck me just how powerful God's creation is. And it was a moment that I cannot ever forget. And then it ended. We had to come down. And that wasn't easy because it was so cloudy. But we figured our way down, or I wouldn't be here to talk to you about it. It was a peace that surpasses understanding, a type of freedom, that present moment experience that Jesus invites us into always. Forgetting about the past, don't worry about the future, get into that present moment. And it's that freedom, it's really what Jesus is offering Nicodemus. A freedom from the human-made struggles of the world into a whole new dimension of God's grace. That's what he's offering. A mountaintop experience, to be sure, that could be realized right here, right now, even at sea level, or if you're in Michigan, our average is about 900 feet above sea level. You can experience it there. So with that said, I'm taking this story and I'm placing it in the last week of Jesus' life. Maybe it's Monday night, maybe it's Tuesday night. Jesus has come into Jerusalem, he's preached at the temple, he's stirred things up. Nicodemus has seen all of that. And with that said, this guy named Nicodemus only appears in the Gospel of John. So you're not going to read about him anywhere else. He's in the Gospel of John. He appears 3 times. The first time is at night when he wants to talk to Jesus about things. The second time is when he's a part of the Sanhedrin. He is encouraging that council to at least give Jesus a trial. And then finally, at the end of Jesus' life, we see Nicodemus helping bring burial spices and that sort of thing. So he goes kind of full circle. Now, with that said, that first evening, it's important to understand that Nicodemus is a very, very powerful man. He is a member of the Sanhedrin. That's, I don't know, kind of like the Supreme Court, kind of, or something for the Jewish existence at the time of Jesus. It includes Pharisees, which Nicodemus was, and really, I think Jesus comes out of the Pharisee sect, and then Sadducees, a different Jewish sect. But they come together and they rule on a lot of things. And they're all, I think all of them are pretty reasonably wealthy. Some maybe more than others. Certainly the Sadducees are probably more wealthy. But a lot of wealth, a lot of power, and Nicodemus has a lot of both, near as I can understand. And he's been listening to Jesus, He's been listening to Jesus. He's been watching Jesus. He's paying attention to the teachings about peace. And somehow Nicodemus intuitively understands that he is beginning to experience the truth. He finds it in his solitude. He finds it in that present moment of being with God, and he hears the voice of Jesus. And within all of that, Nicodemus senses that the world he has been living in is not authentic. That power and riches and fame, that's not really what it's all about. He becomes more aware and concerned really about the pain and suffering he has caused others, because Jesus makes that very clear, and he's listening very intently. Jesus opens his eyes. And so he reaches out. Nicodemus reaches out in the night. He wants to learn more. He's afraid, and that's why he wants to meet at night, but he is drawn into a different dimension. And now he's meeting with Jesus and asking questions, and Jesus says to really understand all this, you have to be born again of the Spirit to really get it. The world in which you are born to is not going to teach what I'm talking about. You need to be reborn, or we might say be reset or rebooted or whatever, but something's got to change. Now, the prevailing faith that Nicodemus is brokering in before meeting Jesus is certainly the Torah, but the law of the Torah is squeezed. The life of the law is just squeezed out of it. It's just brittle, it's static, it doesn't breathe. But Jesus' ministry is to breathe life into that law, right? Jesus says, I didn't come to erase it, I come to fulfill it, because the law is a good thing. And so, where am I? In the end, we see John's gospel, John's gospel, that Nicodemus is reborn. He has had that experience. Somehow he has transitioned from the powerful, judgmental kind of person into this whole new person who becomes a disciple of Jesus. And we can do that too. We are people of faith, and sometimes we need to reboot as well. And it always becomes, for all of us, a matter of choice. It's a matter of choice. We can be born again every day. Matter of fact, that's the only way it works. You have to be born again every day, maybe several times within a day, depending on how bad the day's going. It might start with an awakening, or we call an epiphany, and it evolves into a daily, sometimes hourly, minute-by-minute experience, this idea of moving into the life of the Spirit. And it's an experience that realizes that within each of us is a sacred dimension. There's an intuition within who we are about giving and receiving God's love. It's built into us. We are children of God. We've been created by God. We've got that in us. It's a matter of pulling it out. And as we do, as we tap into that, we are able to start to discern the baloney in the world from the truth and start to move away from that which is not the Spirit. You see, the world offers something different than the world of the Spirit. It's a material satisfaction that never really, ever really satisfies. Of course, we need some material, but it drains our resources. This strive to have more and more, it drains our resources, and it limits our capacity to give and receive God's love. And we are now in the midst of a situation in the world where resources have moved more and more in the direction of war, as many resources have been pulled away from the poor and those who need that much more. It's an interesting thing. with motivations that are maybe dubious. But in any event, we must be born again each day. And another way of looking at it from a Lutheran perspective, maybe it's remembering our baptisms. That's another way of saying it. Remembering our baptisms each day. And in this respect, we dive into the waters of baptism. The waters of baptism is and are the great shalom: compassion, mercy, justice, forgiveness, and grace. We get bathed in that, and we work with that. We give it and we receive it. And we fully realize as we do how much we are loved by God and how much potential we have to share God's love with others. We recognize that we are, in fact, in a community right here at St. John that is striving to follow in the footsteps of Jesus. We learn how to properly care for ourselves so that we can care for others. In the end, Nicodemus faces this truth, and he begins to trust Jesus and lives a new life, a life of true peace. I should say this is good news, and I invite us to let the courage of Nicodemus be an inspiration to all of us in our efforts to fine-tune our faith. But with this said, let us also sense the Spirit in our midst, directing us to the still small voice of God. And let that still small voice help erase the voices of greed, contempt, judgmentalism, racism, and war, allowing us to settle into our mission of sharing God's peace. Amen.